This meeting is called to order. Good morning and welcome to the August 13th meeting of the Douglas County Criminal Justice Courting Council. My name is Pam Weegan. I'm the chair of the CJCC, and this will be a hybrid meeting. Due to the construction of the courthouse, the CJCC meetings are being held in EOCA in the Law Enforcement Center. I want to pass on a little information regarding how we'll conduct our meeting. We ask that all members on Zoom please turn on video if you have it. We ask that all members on Zoom mute their line when not speaking. We ask that you please identify yourself each time you speak. If you're on Zoom and have a public comment to make during the public comment section of the agenda, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Recordings of the CJCC meetings are available on the CJCC website after each meeting. Our first agenda item today is the 2025-2027 strategic planning process kickoff and discussion, and I'm going to let Katie take it away.
Thank you. I'll turn the video back on. This is going to be weird, so I'm sorry. Technology is not our friend today. I'm going to try to share my screen. Right, I need to share my screen. Or is it already shared? No, they can see. I don't understand what I'm doing here.
It's what happened to there it is. Oh yes, it's just low.
Okay. Okay, so today we've talked a lot about over the last several months about kind of reimagining CJCC. It started with the assessment that JMI did with us last fall, and then the spring with taking those assessments and really revising our bylaws. And we're getting ready to move into the next phase of that, which is strategic planning. So today, Christy is going to spend a lot of time, and Christy Danford, who is the consultant with us from JMI, is going to kind of walk through a lot of how we envision this process kind of going. I want to kind of check in. So the last time we all met we had a kind of random special meeting on June 26th to review the bylaws, the revised bylaws that our bylaws work group had worked on. That night, we went to the Board of County Commissioners with those, and there were several CJCC members, whether intentionally or not, were there also at the meeting, and the Board of County Commissioners approved the bylaws that you all had seen and approved earlier that day as well. So those fully go into effect in January, but between now and then, there's a lot for us to kind of work on to bring those to life. And the biggest piece of that is strategic planning, which this process will be probably different for some folks. It's going to be intense. I think intense for me and the JMI team. But so today we're going to talk about, I just want to kind of check in and say, yes, the Board of County Commissioners, you all did, and we got really good feedback. You all did great work between the bylaws work group and then also our other members who had, all of you who provided feedback and participated in that process. So today we're going to talk about how we transition to the next scope of work with JMI. So we have talked about keeping JMI kind of on board as we move over this next year into the CJCC's kind of next iteration. There's kind of two main components of that scope of work. One is helping facilitate the strategic planning process, which will be the focus of kind of from now through the end of the year. Hopefully, if we can finish it by the end of the year. And then the other part, one of the other changes that the bylaws made was creating an executive committee. And so helping to onboard the executive committee starting in January. So they will kind of hang out with us and kind of make sure that that committee and that kind of comes together, because that's also a new component to this CJCC that we haven't had before. So Christy's going to spend most of the meeting kind of talking us through a lot of that, and then at least kind of the technical aspects of their scope of work, and then we'll transition into the meeting about more practically kind of where we go from here, what the asks of you all as CJCC members will be in this process, and questions. For Christy's part, Christy will probably answer a lot of questions as she goes through. And so we'll kind of take a pause after she goes through the technical kind of scope of work and check in and then kind of keep going. I feel like nobody can see my screen except for y'all in this room. Robin, can you see my screen or no?
No, we can't.
So I do. So 1 second, and then Christy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we can't see you or your screen. Oh,
Oh, I turned the video off. Sorry, because
Okay.
me.
do you want to turn it to slideshow view? Hi, everyone. I can't see you, but I'm imagining the room.
Hold on. We have a whole I'm done with technology. But hold on now. Let me turn my. Yeah, but she can't see us though.
I mean, you could just chat me. And there you all are. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so that was what I went through, Christy. So you're up next with this.
Okay.
And you just tell me when to move the slide.
I think you can go ahead to the next slide. So I will just kind of give you guys a big picture overview of what we're looking to do, how hopefully we can support you all to, as Katie mentioned, bring the bylaws that were passed to life. So there's going to be a couple of different things, and I'll walk through each of these because they're each different phases of work. Some are going to happen concurrently, some will happen, after the next one. So we've got 5 basic buckets, providing the technical support, which is an ongoing area of work. Helping to bring up some common ground understanding on the quantitative understanding of your system data, as well as the robust strategic planning process, and then the executive committee work, and then towards the end a bit of a closeout work, because I look at this work often as like we're here to support y'all, but to help support y'all enough that you all can run and you don't need us, right? We're just here to be trading wheels for that first beginning part of your new bylaws you passed. And then you're off to the races without needing our support. So, Katie, do you mind hitting the next slide? And I'll just walk you all through each of these phases. So the first is very straightforward, and it's just, helping to make sure we manage the scope of the project, that we participate in your meetings, having regular calls with leadership, with Katie, and just providing that ongoing technical support and whatever format that may take. And that will be for the full life of the project here from August till the end of June of 25. And then the next phase, I want to kind of give a little attention to the next slide, Katie. And that's really, remember when we did the assessment, the data, I mean, my favorite quote from the assessment process was being data rich and information poor. Right? Sort of like, what are the system metrics that you all want to consistently be looking at, be attuned to be able to communicate clearly with your community about how your system's functioning, and trying to pull that together. So one of the things that we built in here is to provide you all with a very sort of structured system data metrics template. So it'll be kind of an Excel sheet that you all can work with Katie to fill out to the extent that you have the information. We'll draw upon other examples across the country, some best practice models to build that out so you kind of have it as a working document that you can plug into with what you know, and also recognizing that there's going to be some parts of it, that are going to be blank, and that's important information to know too. But what we want with this is to really help provide a quantitative data understanding of your system to help ground the next scope of work, which is going to be the strategic planning piece. Katie, if you don't mind hitting that slide. This one is really, we were there, it was on site with you guys late June. I know Katie's been getting feedback, since then about kind of how to structure this out. So we went through to try to come up with a comprehensive way to do the strategic plan with you all in a way that makes sense. First and foremost, that you all have a plan that works for you, that's going to be beneficial to your vision and mission, but also very, obviously very pragmatic and transparent. So when you all agree to the shared goals, whatever specific or measurable and time-bound goals that you all choose, you're going to be transparent about it. So you'll know together what your shared purpose is, and also be able to clearly communicate with your community about what it is you're working towards, and how that progress is happening. Because when you're building that 3-year plan, a lot's going to go into doing it, and we kind of have a short runway to do it, with the goal of trying to have it by the end of this calendar year, so that it can guide your work in 2025 and beyond. So we'll start similar to how we did with the bylaw group, having that formal charter to be clear about what's going to happen in this planning group, to guide the process, not to do the plan in a vacuum, but really just to kind of guide the process and make sure that it's inclusive and going to be a robust piece of work that's going to include some time to gather input from your stakeholders. We'll come out and we'll do focus groups, and we'll, with whatever constituent groups make sense. We'll also offer an online survey so that we can get broader input than just those who show up in the focus group. But we want the folks closest to the work to be part of this process, and we'll also be able to have opportunities for input beyond just the people who happen to be in the room at the time. We'll also be taking what we get from you all through the qualitative information that we gather in those focus groups and surveys, with what we get from the data metric template that you all complete. So what goes into this is really going to be pulled together in a way that everybody kind of has the same playing field, the same level of set of information, to give you all a briefing presentation that really brings that information together, so that when everybody comes together, we'll come back out and do a very sort of structured and facilitated strategic planning retreat with the CJCC members to get into the nitty-gritty of what do we want to work on? What are the goals and objectives we want in our plan? What are we going to do? Who's going to do it? When are we going to get it done by? So we'll do a lot of that legwork on the site with you, and then we'll come back to our respective offices and work with the work group to do that iterative drafting, so that you ultimately get a very clear and concrete and transparent strategic plan that says what y'all are going to be doing for the next 3 years, and ideally by the December meeting have had feedback and time to really review it and approve it, so you can hit the ground running in the new calendar year. Or also recognizing it may be January. However it shakes out, a lot of this is going to depend on what gets put into it, and how well we can get things scheduled to kind of keep that pace to target having that done, hopefully in December, or worst case scenario by January. And then Katie, if you don't mind clicking forward. The next phase of that is really, helping to prop up that leadership structure, that executive committee that you built into your bylaws. So I know with your bylaws, you're supposed to identify your executive committee members by December, and then we'll work with Katie to, help work that process forward, and help to onboard those new executive committee members, and work with that group, that small, nimble group of executive committee, to get going, and to really, bring some of those initial requirements that are in your bylaws to life over those first 6 months. So that's, as simple as, what's going to be in your strategic plan, confirming your community representatives, having that posting of your annual membership and your meeting schedule, and really kind of working with, whatever committees you're going to have, they're going to start to put what's in that strategic plan into implementation. So, the goal really here is to carry y'all through that as best we can, to help you, to support you, to work closely with Katie and the executive committee, so that by the time we get towards the end, Katie, if you'll click the next slide, we'll kind of wrap it up, by June. And with that, we'll kind of leave you with a final presentation of kind of all of the progress you all have made, looking back at the accomplishments, and also giving you some guidance for next steps. So you'll have good information to jump off with. Also, hopefully, if I had a magic wand, by this time in the project and in our life with you, you will have a good bit of information that you'll be ready to go and put into your first required annual report. That's part of your bylaws that will be coming towards the end of the year. And you've got your executive committee, you've got your plan, y'all are off to the races. So that's the goal. That's what we're working towards, and we'll of course be very flexible and nimble and do whatever we can to support y'all to get to where your bylaws say you all want to go. Any questions?
Yeah, do y'all have questions? Stop sharing. There's more, there's more after this, but for this particular, like just on for thinking about just kind of how, do y'all have questions about all of that part of what we will all be embarking on for the next 4 months?
Sounds like a thoughtful way to go forward.
It will be, it'll be a lot of work. Thank you, Pam, for saying that. Yeah. And I think like Christy said, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the next part, but the kind of whatever we put in is kind of what we get out. And for folks who have gone through this kind of more intense kind of strategic planning process, I think that's probably true for looking at, Lily and Patrick, if that resonates with kind of y'all's experience too. So a lot on the front end, and with this being the first time that we're going through this intense level of kind of planning, it hopefully gets easier, but it'll be a lot. I think about some of the other examples across the community. I think about like the Place for Everyone, for folks in here who were part of that plan, that developing that plan that was just as intense, potentially more intense than this will be, but a similar type of process that will hopefully really guide us for the next 3 years. So I just want to make sure it can feel a little kind of not tangible or arbitrary, like not having, if we don't, since we haven't done this before. So I just want to make sure folks feel okay with at least how we're high level thinking about this.
Seems like a good roadmap.
Yep.
And I definitely appreciate having JMI's assistance to help us level set and like dip our toes into a more intensive process so that we feel confident doing that again in the future.
Go back to my slides and talk about kind of how we take that to, I'll share my screen this time. So the next, I feel like this is not going to let me click from here. No, that's recorder, and it doesn't let me. I am glad you do, Pam. I don't. Okay. So similar to, and Christy alluded a little bit to this. So the rest of kind of today, what we wanted to make sure we covered, because we really only have 2.5 meetings left in the year, with the CJCC, including today. So we wanted to kind of switch gears, and kind of talk about how do we, what does this mean for us, for you all on the CJCC, and how do we move from here? So the first part of that, like we did with the bylaws, and with the bylaws work group, and we wrote into the bylaws, talked about as we form work groups, they should really be formally chartered, with a process that outlines very clearly what are the expectations of everybody who's part of that. Why are we making this group? What do we want them to do? How are we going to know that they've done those things? Essentially, that charter helps keep work group members and then also the CJCC kind of accountable to each other for that work. I will just speak from my experience with that bylaws work group. That charter was really helpful, I think, for that work group. And they really stuck to, throughout all of their meetings, it really guided kind of what they did. And made it a lot easier for us to kind of stay on track and make sure that we were working towards the things that you all as CJCC members wanted them to accomplish. So the first step for this, for kind of bringing this to life, I don't know how much, I can't recall 15 minutes ago how much of this Christy talked about, but a lot of the really heavy lifting of these deliverables will really be me, Christy, and Amy from JMI. So there will be a lot of that the heavy lifting will be by the kind of staff part of this. But to keep this is a large process, and to kind of keep it moving and make sure that we're not catching blind spots, or to make sure that we're not missing a particular stakeholder group or a particular perspective. We have kind of talked about putting a small work group together to help me, Christy, and Amy kind of guide and shepherd the process along. So that's why we've talked about the charter. And we talked a lot about, when Christy was here in June, at the end of that meeting, we talked about, you all gave a lot of good feedback about thinking about this process. What are some of the things that were important to you all? And then since then, so that actually gave us a lot of feedback to kind of start thinking about, based on that conversation, what are some of the either deliverables or kind of process, what would be important for this work group to make sure that they included or accomplished. And then since then, I had sent out like we did for the bylaws work group back in the spring, I had sent out kind of a list of questions to gather feedback, to gather additional feedback. And so using that feedback that I received from other members, that kind of formed the basis for the charter. And the charter was this draft charter was up here. We're kind of walk through that a little bit. So when we got feedback, we heard feedback kind of really got broken into two sets of themes. We got feedback about kind of perspectives and characteristics of like who should be, if we think about a small work group to guide this process, what is important about those folks, or what should be important about those folks. These are all this should all be pretty direct quotes from those of y'all who gave feedback. This is attached at the end of the charter if y'all have it. For those of y'all who are online, I had a technology issue and I couldn't get it attached it'll be attached to the meeting invitation after the meeting. So thinking about for the group members, folks who have maybe had experience with this before, analytical skills, communication skills, kind of broad systems perspectives. These were things that we were able to pull out that were important for this work group members to have. Christy, is there anything you want to add here before I go to the next one?
No, I think it's good. And I think the feedback was really helpful and insightful, especially like the decisive and goal oriented to guide the process, and acknowledging, there's information and perspectives that they don't know yet, but to be very also logical and realistic and to grow buy-in. I mean, this group I think is going to be really helpful to that process. So I thought all the feedback that you all sent in really is helpful and useful to be thinking about the work group membership.
And then a lot of the other feedback was kind of thinking about more about as we think about this process and engage in the strategic planning process, what is important for that process as a whole. And a lot of this should not be, these were things that I have just kind of come to expect you all talk about these things a lot. So things like providing a clear path forward for the CJCC. I know that's an important component for a lot of you all, including diverse perspectives. We got a lot of feedback about making sure that as we develop what this planning process looks like and implement like the site visits, that as we gather feedback through the surveys, the focus groups, all of that, to make sure that it's not just the people sitting in this room and it's not just the staff, of each of you, and it's not just your peers who may not be at the table, but that you're representing, but reaching out to our folks for sure who have lived experience and who have been impacted in some form or fashion by the various aspects of our system. There may be other professional perspectives that could impact or be impacted by the justice system that are not here, that we need to make sure that we're connecting to. So that was consistent feedback that we heard from everyone. This feedback was more about where this kind of mirrors in the draft charter is. These are things that we think the work group members should consider as they work through this process and develop this process. So making sure that they're going back to your feedback about what you want to make sure is a component of this process, and considering that as they think about the focus group participants, or how do we make, who we're distributing the survey and different surveys to. Christy, did you have anything on that?
No, I think you're good. And this is, again, it's all going to go back to, what sort of guidance we have. We'll have limitations of what can happen while we have so many days on site, or, things like that. But at the end of the day, what you all put into your plan is really going to be dependent upon what gets put, into the process, and making sure that it is an inclusive and transparent process.
As y'all are reading the charter, the structure is very similar to the bylaws work group charter as well. So it just updated to not reflect bylaws process. But so part of that structure was, so thinking about what this work group, this feels a little like squishy to me as I think about how to kind of explain this. So I might lean on Christy a little bit here, but thinking about the purpose for this work group, because so much of more of the kind of legwork and heavy lifting will be on the project staff. We really view this kind of small work group serving the purpose of, this work group is not going to develop the plan. I hope that's like this, they're not going to be working on developing the plan themselves. They're just kind of creating the space for all of us to do that together. But we would be Christy, Amy, and I would be really leaning on this work group to kind of advise and guide the completion of the tasks that were a couple slides back. So like the data metrics template, the survey that JMI will be developing, the briefing document that will kind of, based on feedback from focus groups and surveys, this would be what kind of should guide the strategic plan retreat that when they come back on site. We'll ask this work group to review and provide feedback along the way prior to it coming to the CJCC, just to make sure that we're getting folks' perspective on that. Really identifying and engaging, seeking feedback, encouraging participation from the other folks who are key to this process as we move through this. And then kind of the last thing, I think this group, I envision kind of being a bit of a sounding board, or kind of like, does this make sense? Does this seem clear? Is this what we heard from, did you hear the same thing from that focus group? As we kind of draft the final product to present to you all based on all y'all's feedback. So that it feels squishy. It might be squishy. If you have questions, that's perfectly fine. And I don't know, Christy, if you need to clarify things I just said about that.
I mean, it's just like the same thing we did with the bylaw work group. They're the ones that are going to have the more sort of time and attention to work and be that, sort of iterative process of giving the feedback and helping to get people to show up, kind of, and being realistic, so that, you all can trust them to help guide the process, and they're getting your feedback and their input, throughout the life of this. So, we don't want to end up in a situation where we're developing something in a vacuum. That's really where why the work group matters so much is to help make sure it's getting developed thoughtfully and in an inclusive and transparent way, but also recognizing your membership is, you all have day jobs and you all have organizations to run, and you're really just sort of counting on your peers that would sit on this work group to kind of help guide that process along. That's really it.
So the question, this is Doris Ricks. When you say small work group, how many people will be on that work group in addition to doing the strategic?
4 seems like a good number, but,
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
we'll revisit that. I mean, where we can talk about that now if y'all want. We have so we've kind of identified 4 folks so far. I think 4 feels like a manageable number. And we tried to kind of reach across disciplines and then also kind of share, gather different experiences and things. So spoiler alert, the folks that we've talked to so far, Patrick Schmitz, Chief Levitt, Jessica Glendinning, and Judge McCabery. So that was kind of where we landed at the moment.
I guess, Katie, this, I mean, maybe is a little bit different from the bylaws work group. There's gonna be a role, I mean, bylaws work group did a lot of drafting
Yes.
of sections and brought that back to the whole CJCC. There's
Yeah.
gonna be an opportunity for the whole
Yes.
CJCC plus other stakeholders and other groups.
Yes, this,
Engaged in this.
yes, and this will look different in that with it, that bylaws work group was larger and also a lot more, like had just a lot different, a lot broader perspectives, because we were really relying on specific input from those disciplines to say, well, what would your discipline say about that? Or, to guide, we were really leaning on them to develop the material or to provide kind of that base material for you all to react to, which will not be the same thing here.
Katie, I wonder if it would help if you click to the next slide just to kind of go through
Is
the
the next one the
responsibility.
staff? Okay,
Oh,
so the
sorry.
staff, so similar to in the bylaws charter, we kind of had responsibilities of the work group members, the CJCC, and then also the staff. And so we're kind of structured that similarly here. So the staff team is myself, Christy, and Amy. A lot of these are similar, other than we really are responsible for kind of developing the final deliverables of the scope of work. So that's like the data template, the briefing guides, the ultimate strategic plan, like delivering all of those. And that is also attached. That's one of the attachments in the draft charter that you all have. Other than that, like really providing support, looking to the work group members for support back as we move through this process. Go ahead, Doris.
I did have a question. I love these 4 members. But what happened to the community?
Oh, I don't
I
know,
mean,
Doris.
you said different perspectives, different characteristics.
In the plan, we can add, I mean, that's part of, oh, go ahead,
I'm
Christy,
just
I'm cutting you.
I was going to say, Doris, are you volunteering?
What? No, I'm not, I'm not saying that, but I am looking at, oh my gosh, all the justices and here, but I don't see a community rep. I mean, I get, mental and.
But it doesn't mean
It's not the discipline, yeah, it's not the discipline.
Okay, well, I'm just looking at, if you have a small committee and you're saying you want these different characteristics and perspectives, I just see police and I see the chief defender and I see mental health and then I see the judge and I'm like, where is some other perspective besides those perspectives?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think this isn't the only piece of, there'll be, those perspectives will come through in the larger strategic planning process. and the focus groups, what my understanding. This group isn't gonna do all the work.
They're kind of planning.
Maybe words Patrick from Burnash. Let me liken it to the strategic planning process that we conduct at Burnash. I have a team of champions in a sense who guide the process, but their responsibility is to engage our entire workforce, our community, our partners, get that feedback. They just make sure that that's happening, but it's not their perspective. So I understand. I think if we get a community member as part of this might be a really good idea. It's their perspective on how to drive forward, but that team isn't responsible for creating it. They are just facilitating and make sure that at the end of our process, they have done a really good job of hearing and incorporating what they. My team obviously is doing the bulk of the work, whereas for this, Katie and JMI folks, bulk of the writing and stuff. But yeah, we identify effort.
I understand,
That too.
I understand all of those pieces, but I was just wondering.
Yeah.
I have a question. Sorry, all the way down here. And is there just like the staff has responsibilities? Can you see what this core group's responsibilities are and how
I
that
think that's the next one.
communicates to the connection of the larger group? Because if we're wanting the input in this to be not only a process driven within the council, but a community collaborative process, I think ensuring that their responsibilities are not going to influence too much, but allow space for that community collaboration. And if that's not there, then it makes sense to me to have.
So this is the kind of summary of for the work group. So the first part is kind of keeping the project staff on track with the deliverables that we need to be sure to provide. And then identifying, engaging, seeking feedback from necessary stakeholders throughout all of the planning process, encouraging participation throughout all of the different iterative tasks, and participating in communication as we go through, not just updates here, but for other groups of stakeholders. And a big emphasis for this group is really, I think, encouraging and kind of growing the buy-in of not just CJCC members and not just members of maybe your staff as CJCC members, but all of the other, this is a fairly small group of stakeholders, right? When we think about who contributes or who is impacted by what this body as CJCC does. And so really, we would hope that this group also is able to kind of build buy-in from other people who are not at this table to participate throughout the process.
And I think that communication, piece of it is really important too. And I think the next slide is also CJCC member responsibilities, because if I'm just going to give a survey, for example, right? I mean, a survey is only as good as who fills it out. So, having that communication and making it accessible and like Doris, getting it to as far and as wide as you can, that's going to take everybody's, help. But when somebody shows up to a focus group, they walk in the door, they should already know kind of why they're there. And make sure the room has, a good group of folks in it to help really give thoughtful perspective into the development of the plan and really, again, ensuring, those closest to it are really part of building it.
Feedback on this. So I don't know, Marielle, since this was kind of going, does how for
Looking at this, I think, like this is saying, looking at all of our responsibilities will help see where we can plug in. And I am interested in the next step, see what is.
So some of these are similar to the work providing feedback to the bylaws work group, where we asked y'all to give a lot of feedback throughout that process. So some of these are the same, but making sure that as work group members reach out, that you're responsive or that you do give feedback, asking questions, as we go along, engaging with work group members. As we, go through the process, the 1, 2, 3, the fourth one probably only applies to agency, some of the agency heads. And then also like Christy was just saying, encouraging participation of, the folks that are within your kind of sphere of influence that we may not know, may not be part of this table, or that we may not, initially kind of think of. Reviewing, so the briefing presentation is the like stepping off point before the onsite like strategic planning retreat. And so making sure that that you've spent time with that whenever we get there, prior to the planning retreat, and as we move from the planning retreat to whatever the final strategic plan would look like, providing feedback through those.
So we envisioning the planning retreat to be bulk of the writing, bulk of the, I mean, not like, but bulk of the. After
The
you
bulk
gather
of
all
the work,
information,
yeah.
then all of us. That board gets to get the bulk of it.
Yeah. Kind of taking all of the,
Content.
yeah, so there will be a series, the data template that JMI will be developing, will provide a lot of kind of quantitative, a good baseline of where are we at with information and system metrics, where are we not at with that. So there's the series of kind of quantitative feedback, but then through the focus groups, which will be on site as well. And then this survey, and Christine, I've talked about different iterations of the survey. I think there's some that make sense for, and I think we have room to do kind of like community focused survey versus the like member specific or discipline specific kind of survey. But the surveys and the focus groups then really provide a lot more qualitative feedback about issues that may show up in some of the data, may not show up in some of the data that we're able to collect through that template. But then so after we get all of that, collecting all of that feedback and information will be the first between now and we figure like our next CJCC meeting, we're hoping to have at least been making decent headway on some of the data template and preparing for the focus group series. That's what is going to form that briefing document. So we would kind of compile all of that and say, here's what we heard. Here's what we heard from the 300 people that we talked to in the focus group, or the 300 survey responses. Here's what we heard from that. And then during that strategic planning retreat, then you all would kind of sift through that to say, well, what rises to the top? Where do we have buy-in? What does that look like to get there? What are the tasks and objectives and kind of strategies underneath that over the next year and then year 2 and year 3?
Kind of think of it like a funnel, right? We're going to get a lot of information going in, and then we're going to funnel it out into a very objective strategic plan.
It feels like or is pushing along the process and maybe doing some more of the structure, and then we come in with community input, the disciplinary input, but some of the meat behind the strategic. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes, that is a better way to say that.
That was a very
Thank you. Thank you, Meredith. That would, yes, thank you.
This Commissioner Reed, I'll just chime in and say, Doris, I really appreciate the question. I think that it illuminates that on the surface, I can appreciate why it looks like we might be leaving out a perspective. And so I hope this was helpful to flush that out. And I would say, I think that I can probably speak confidently for Katie, and that welcome another person on that group if you're interested in the sort of additional lift. But I think part of the thought about this group in particular is that because we are embarking on such an intensive membership-wide process, that there's going to be a lot of asks of members, all of us, including community members. And so my hope is that those 4 individuals, along with staff, as they're developing the focus groups, the surveys, the other sort of engagement activities, that they're seeking out 1 or 2 or some of us from the larger membership to help focus in on that focus group, right? That are pulling in maybe community members for this topical area that they dig into a little bit deeper, and that those 4 members' jobs are to really actively engage and keep the enthusiasm, if you will, as we start to ask a lot more work of everybody, because part of the strategic planning process beyond that intensive retreat where we're all together trying to funnel that information into a focused plan, then comes the development of those work groups and newly formed focus areas that we will definitely need community, broader community input on. So I appreciate that. I think that the intent was to not ask too many people for that extra heavy lift, knowing that we were going to be asking a lot of everybody to engage heavily over the next several months on this sort of aggressive timeline. And if there's a community member representative who feels interested and inclined towards that level of the process, I think we welcome that.
Nicely stated, Commissioner.
Yeah, this is an aggressive time.
Oh, yes. it is.
Plan.
Yep.
This one we're working on now, for July of next year started. So we're gonna try to do something very quick, and intense fashion.
And this is Lori Alvarado, and I would say the same thing from, which I think bodes that we need to be really specific about what are our 1, 2, or 3 priorities and keeping them very focused, because normal strategic planning processes like this take a year to 18 months to do really, really well. And we're going to try to cram it into 4 months. And so I would say from our group, we need to say, what are we really, really passionate about changing? And let's concentrate on those. We're going to learn the process. We can do this again with some more thought and some more time, but it's going to require us to be, I think, very focused on what is most important. What are we going to leverage to get the most movement in the system?
This whole
Design for guidance.
Yes, that's one of my questions is it too early to talk about how many focus groups and was JMI thinking, and maybe Katie, I don't know how many more slides you have, but it might be helpful to see Christie's face. Do you have more slides?
Well, and to your point as well, we're on an aggressive timeline, and I know everybody's schedules are getting packed, so probably getting that day and a half scheduled, like on people's calendars, like ASAP needs to happen. And maybe I'm only the one that has calendars that are filling up and don't have like a day and a half between now and December, potentially. So that probably needs to happen really quick.
That was the last one. So Christy, I will kind of let you guide. I don't,
Yeah, well,
you're the one who probably should guide that.
and scheduling, I'm all about. I said to Katie earlier, I'm like, let's get the strategic planning retreat schedule, and then we'll back everything else into that. And you're wanting to have enough time to between sort of the conclusion of the focus groups and the survey to really work on giving you all a good briefing presentation so that you can, check it out before you even show up if you have time to do so. The question about focus groups, I think we're going to be there for 2 full days on site plus travel. So I think we're anticipating 6. And we can do them whatever time of day makes sense. We can hold some at night if it's easier for people to get to, whatever works. And then even when we get there for the strategic planning retreat, we're leaving a little time on the back end. So we can sort of sit with Katie afterwards and kind of put more detail into it than we'll be able to get too far into with a group full of people. Was there another question I missed? And I totally agree with you on the keeping it just a couple of things, very focused. These are your first steps forward. that you'll build on from here. So, doing a couple things and doing them really well is far better than saying you're going to do 80,000 things and crash and burn in 79,000 of them, right? We want to be very specific and collected on a couple of key strategies, not overdo it. Did I miss another question or comment?
I don't think so. Katie, what was your plan for scheduling that?
No, I was just, my first plan was to get a work group meeting scheduled, so I hadn't thought about.
I mean, I think we made it do a good one.
Yeah,
I just
kind
get
of
it.
people pull what works for them, for travel, what works, that's sort of some option. We could start with so we want getting that date scheduled and then back in so that it works better. Very helpful.
Hey, Christy, to clarify, you will be here for the, JMI will be here for the 2-day site visit with mostly focus groups, and then you will come back for the 1.5 day retreat, correct? Okay.
Yes, yes, correct.
Yeah, I would say, Christy, if there's like, in terms of timing, if you have like a month or, a time frame, like if it's mid-October to mid-November or whatever, that should be helpful for trying to get the start backing into that date.
I would agree. I mean, I think we definitely, we can, and that was the other question, like with the work group, if they're ready to go, if you all are okay with that charter, just trying to get to that, because we also want to have some time with them to be able to give us feedback on like the structure of the focus groups, the content of the survey, those kind of things. So I want to make sure that there's they have some time to look at their schedules to kind of make sure that, if we say we're going to be out there to do focus groups the second week of October, that we're sure that group's going to be ready to go by then too, because we want to really be thoughtful in how we structure them, how we communicate them, how you all are able to encourage folks to show up to them. In a perfect world, we'd come out there probably, I would like to say the second or third week of October at the latest, and then come out there for the strategic planning retreat sometime, ballpark mid-November to like the first or second week of December, but not let it go too far to where we're getting into the holidays and making it tough.
Christy, this is Lori. Question, like on the work group for the bylaws, there were times when we needed feedback from the CJCC as a whole. Do you anticipate that as well during this process? I'm just trying to. It was really, really important. I served on that group. It was really, really important that this group responded timely and allowed good thought process so that we could be inclusive of the perspectives. Do you anticipate similar processes here?
Absolutely. Even down to like how we're communicating, right? If you're going to promote a survey and you want people to fill it out, it's got to resonate with people to actually want to do it, right? And your feedback, the CJCC members' feedback on that is going to be really important. Same thing for getting people to show up to the focus groups.
I just want to be clear what we're signing up for in support of the work group.
I think I might anticipate more of that towards the end as we get to like the actual like bottom of the funnel. Probably as far as like review this.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear about what you needed from
Yeah, I
us.
think it's not quite as intense in that regard as the bylaws that y'all done. So I'm going to send out a doodle poll after I touch base with my work groups. We're looking at ideally mid-October-ish for the focus groups. Is that kind of?
When's our October JCC?
It's the 8th. Yeah. And Christine and I talked a little bit about would it be possible if it's possible to kind of tag team or dovetail something around that CJCC meeting, but I'm not, I think that may depend on how quickly the rest of, how quickly things go, between now and then, because we really want to be sure that, that we're not kind of like shortchanging ourselves around making sure that like from the, like that data template, and that's a big component of on the front end that JMI is really doing a lot of lifting on. And so I think that might be the concern. So I'm not sure, Christy, what your thoughts were around that puts us, I think, the second full week of October, if we target it around that CJCC meeting.
Yeah, or the CJCC meeting, becomes the sort of rallying to make sure people show up the next week when we get on ground. However we need to do it. I want to make sure we have enough time while we're there to do a good number of focus groups for you guys, and you all can decide if you want, some of that time spent in this meeting on site or do it the week after. We'll figure it out. I don't mean to be squishy with scheduling. I just want to make sure we have some time first. And my other teammate Amy, she's not here today, but she'll be coming in too. I want to make sure we've got schedule square, so we can even come into the first work group meeting with these weeks work, and then kind of take it from there with what makes sense for what works for everybody else. And I apologize about my four-legged office mate.
Are there other questions or things that we haven't maybe covered that are burning questions? This was kind of also a really quick turnaround from like when we wrapped up with JMI at the end of June with the bylaws. It's been maybe 10-ish days that we've actually had a contract, and that we've been able to even kind of talk about what like scope of work looks like. So this has been a really quick like turnaround. So if I seem unprepared, I haven't had this material for very long. So really in the last week, JMI and I were really able to spend a lot of time last week kind of talking about, so what does this, where do we kind of go from here? What does this mean for you all? So
I don't think there's any questions.
any feedback on the charter or anything that is this, or do folks feel okay kind of empowering this
I'm good with it.
to kind of move on this?
Any objections?
Okay.
Sometimes that questions get diverse.
So we'll just look for our doodle polls. We'll make.
Yeah, so I'll send a bunch of you.
Everybody's.
Love that.
It may not be like this way. I do want to set up full work group together first. Do that. So it may be like.
You do what you do.
Okay. So, Christy, is there anything else you had for this before we?
No, I think
Got a thumbs up on the charter, so I think we're okay on that.
we're good. If you all think of anything or have anything comes up, I'll be here. I'll be working closely with Katie and respond to whatever you guys need as we go forward. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to come on pretty quick, but I think it's going to be fun. And I say that as a CJCC, policy nerdy wonk who enjoys this kind of thing. But I think it's well worth doing. And I look forward to working with you all as we dive in the next couple months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think next we want to talk about our October 8th agenda.
Yeah, which
We have anything we want to discuss?
Yeah, are there-
Any work group update?
Yeah, at a minimum, probably if we're not, it should be a work group or should be the strategic planning update, but I wasn't sure I want to make sure if there's particular
You want to
topics that members need to make sure that we're.
What I
Bring it
flagged as
forward.
Commissioner Reed, I flagged as a question, is October when we need to talk about selection for the executive committee based on the timeline we set out? Or do you think the December meeting is the right?
So December is, so, okay, this actually is helpful because that triggers something else for me to think about. So the bylaws say we will do elections in October, in the last meeting of the year, which is December. Initially, I think in one version, in a couple of the versions that you all that we had looked at, we had talked about doing the nomination process, like the meeting before that, and I think we ended up just scrapping that. So everything for electing officers, so the chair, the vice chair, and the member at large will happen in the December meeting. And the big reason why we did that was for anybody who's elected, who's running on an election cycle in November. So everything for election of officers will happen in December. One thing that we do need to touch base about potentially, or I welcome feedback about whether we should include this in October's meeting. Historically, our community representatives on the CJCC have been direct appointees by the Board of County Commissioners. And so for this one particular board, this is not a board that that folks have had to apply to or anything like that. But with the bylaws, the way that we changed our community representatives to where we have one who is more of who's an at-large, who's identified as an at-large member, and then two who are identified as having been directly impacted by the criminal justice system in some fashion. That will then kind of trigger those folks to go through the process of appointment. I may not be speaking about this right, but a similar appointment process by our county commission as other boards. And so I think we may need, in my mind, those should be ready. We should maybe talk about in October, kind of
That process.
the process of like, when do we want to kind of post those? I'm going to have to work. I know I'm going to have to work on the admin side with to get a couple of things changed on our application, I think, to make sure that it's clear what positions folks want to be considered for. But in October, it may be worth talking about just kind of walking through what that process and timeline looks like. The way we have it laid out in the bylaws, the executive committee would review those applications and send their recommendations or send all the applications to the board in January for the board to kind of consider. But
That was a good
I wanted
overview
to
of the
bring,
timeline,
I kind of wanted to bring that. That was a thought that I had was
That
since this
sense
is
to
the
have
first
that
time we're doing this in
Mhm.
October.
Yeah, I think maybe if, Katie, if your goal is to have sort of the administrative side of things in terms of how that form is available online in draft format available to show us, then we can just confirm that there's no sort of missing questions that anybody thinks are really necessary to add. And then that timeline for when they'll be open for applications, expectation that by January, Board of County Commissioners are making those appointments before the February meeting. And then, so thank you. I had thought about that too, but it fell off my brain. So I appreciate that my question triggered that. I think that and thanks for reminding me where we exactly landed on everything happening in December for the executive board. It might be helpful just as a quick overview of that section of the bylaws in the October meeting, since it is a new process, to just reiterate for everybody what those nominations and election of those and any restrictions that we put in the bylaws on who could be an executive committee member.
Actually, quickly add to with the same before we finalize the agenda, we're working on a final draft. Well, not a final draft, it's just something to be the law work that's not that, and so it's something for people to consider if they want to come in with 5 minutes. There's been a pretty significant change in the data collection over the last couple of years. So and I know this case is initiating the data collection, so I'm like, board want to get,
I think we just need to check on the timing. Yeah, just if we can, chiefs have it, I've had enough time for that to review it before that meeting and how much strategic planning work we need to get done. So, but we could, unless there's somebody feels really strongly that has to happen in October, flexible depending on how to work in.
That's fine.
Okay, so I have strategic planning, updates, and then probably a chunk of just kind of an overview of the next couple of the community member application at the process for the application and the process for that. And then reviewing election process and require the officer stuff to get ready for the December meeting for that. Other thoughts for that, or that
I think it's
probably
that's
is a pretty
wait,
good.
it's still the agenda.
Full 9.
Next, we used to provide an opportunity for CJCC members to provide any agency updates that they want to provide to the group. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Seeing none, we want to provide an opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make public comment online or here in person? Robin, is there anybody online that wants to make public comment?
Yes, Rick Kagan, I'm going to promote you to a panelist.
Great.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yeah, appreciate the updates today. It looks like some great work is underway. I've made this comment before. I hope it's considered relevant still, but I would like to see, just as a standard operating procedure, that the CJCC provide updates at each meeting, however brief, on the work of at least two work groups that I'm familiar with. There may be others, but there's one on failure to appear and one on probation violations. I just think it's important that the public is able to track the progress that's being made with those work groups. And so would welcome your addition, having that added to future agendas. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more comment, Robin?
No, no more hands. Thank you.
All right. Nope. Okay, do we have anything else for the good of the order today? See anything? So seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. The next meeting will be October 8th from 11 to 12:30 at EOCA at this location and online. Thank you.